That's what she said last night.
No wonder you're losing the war here. So hurry up, sit down. Look, there's a floor. Does anyone else want to come in? Right, God, it's so... No, I was going to make a joke there, but thank goodness where's the washroom? I don't know. Where's the washroom? In your underpants. There's, usually, you're introduced, usually someone, and they read your Wikipedia entry, which is bad news. So I'll introduce myself. Before I do, I'm going to give you this story because it's absolutely true. A true story about Winston Churchill. And Churchill was a great man in many, many, many ways, but he was also incredibly witty, a really witty guy. And a lot of the so-called cleverness over the years, people didn't really say it at the time. They said it later, they wrote it down, and it became, the idea developed that somehow it was spontaneous. So Oscar Wilde, he was crossing the border, actually he was in Canada, Niagara Falls, and he's meant to have said, they said to him, anything to declare, and he said, only my genius. But he didn't say it, he wrote it down later, he didn't actually say it at the time. So, but this is, Churchill really said this. And Churchill was just a very witty man. He once said about Clement Attlee, who beat him in 1945 in the election, he said, an empty cab drew up to the House of Commons and Clement Attlee got out. And there was that other great line when, I think it was Margot Asquith, I'm not sure though, but she said to him, Winston, you're such a brute. If I was married to you, I'd put poison in your tea. And he said, and if I was married to you, I'd drink it. Now, I'm on a roll here. Margot Asquith, who was a great society lady in the Edwardian times, 1920s, 1930s. Jean Harlow, of all people, the actor Jean Harlow, went up to Margot Asquith and said, hello, Margot. And Margot Asquith said, no, dear, the T is silent, as in Harlow. Think about it. Anyway, Churchill was speaking at Harvard University in... Is that a good conversation? When you're at school, come share it with the class, Michael. Share it. Anyway, shut up. Churchill was... he lost the election in 1945. And when he lost the election, his response was really quite marvellous because he'd led Britain and the Commonwealth, the Empire, the free world against the darkness of Hitlerism. Yet in 1945, the British people voted for the Labour Party. Not against him, but they wanted a new country. And he got the news of the election. He was in his bath. There was no internet, obviously, very little TV. It was mainly radio and telegraph. He got the news from his secretary that the Conservatives had lost the election in 1945. He was in his bath, brandy, cigar, and the secretary came in and said, the Labour Party have won the election. And his response was wonderful. He said, well, he said, that's democracy, and that's what we've been fighting for. You know, amazing. Such grace in a man, because I would have said, what? They were put there. And he didn't. Hitler, of course, when he was losing the war, he said, German people have betrayed me, I should have backed the British. When Churchill came to North America in 1946 and 1947, politicians could take the time off then. If only they took the time off now. And he came to North America and he went on a speaking tour. Churchill had a very luxurious lifestyle, actually beyond his financial capabilities. He was a wealthy man, but he wasn't super wealthy, and he consumed everything. So he was always in need of money. And he came to North America to give a lecture tour, and he came to Canada actually, but mainly in the US. And he was at Harvard University, and he was being introduced at Harvard University by this very pompous academic. I like to think of him as a liberal academic. I don't know if he was, but let's think he was. It makes it more fun. So he's being introduced by this really pompous academic. Now there's Churchill, one of the most famous men in the world. Even now, I think. Won the Nobel Prize for Literature, British Prime Minister for so many years. And he was sitting there being introduced. Now whenever Churchill spoke, he always requested a flask of brandy. You want a little flask of brandy? He drank a lot of brandy. So, Churchill, sitting down, being introduced, flask of brandy, pompous academic, goes to introduce Churchill. And instead of saying, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor, Winston Churchill, he said, now, he said, Before I introduced Mr. Churchill, he said, I'd like to tell him a thing or two about Harvard. Now, Churchill was half American. Not sure if you're aware of that. I mean, he knew America. He loved America. He knew Harvard. So this academic said, and the H in Harvard stands for history. And for 10 minutes, the history of Harvard. Churchill. The A, sir, the A stands for activism. 10 minutes, activism, Randy. And the R stands for reset. This went on for almost an hour. Churchill has finished the brandy. Academic says, ladies and gentlemen, Winston Churchill. Everyone claps. Churchill sort of wakes up. He walks over to the podium and says, I'd like to thank the professor for that introduction. And I'd like to thank the living God that I'm not speaking at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Very different from my introduction, which I think was Michael Corrin. So, who am I? What am I doing here? I'm obviously from Britain originally. I've been in this country half my life. The reason I'm in Canada, absolutely true story. In 1986, I was invited to give a lecture at the University of Tirana, and I came over here, and it was a very boring lecture at a very boring conference. It was the 50th anniversary of the death of G.K. Chesterton, British writer. Anyway, I delivered my paper, I read it out, it was all quite dull, and I was about 100 years younger than anyone else who was speaking then, academics mainly. Anyway, at the end of the conference, this beautiful young woman at the cocktail party at the end of the conference, she came up to me and she said, "You're amazing. And thinking this may never happen again, I married her." The thing is, it has never happened again. And she's now sobered up. But 4 kids later, she can't really get away from it. So that's why I'm in Canada. When I came here, I went to work for the CBC. Men used to run away to sea, now they run away to the CBC. So I was there for a year, I left there, I worked for TV Ontario, and then I worked at the Toronto Star, I was at the Globe and Mail as a columnist. I've worked in a lot of places, but for the past few years, I've been a columnist for the Sun Media Group, that's Toronto, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, London Free Press, Good Standard, and Kingston, a whole bunch of papers. And for 13 years, I hosted a show on CTS called The Michael Corrin Show, but for the past, since June, I think, I've had the show The Arena on Sun News, and I write books, and I write for other newspapers.
Landowner magazine.
Landowner. The best thing I write for is the Landowner magazine. And I would just like to say that if you subscribe to this magazine, gentlemen, you will have a date with this young woman. And I write for magazines and magazines in Europe and the UK as well, and I do a lot of speaking. So that's what I do. Now, I'm going to chat for a little bit, and then I'm going to take questions, because the best part of any of this is Q&A. Because what happens is I'll be on the 401 going home, and you'll say, "Oh, I wish I could have asked it." So I'll chat for a bit, and then we'll have Q&A. And I think I'll talk about what I think are the main threats to us. And when I say us, I don't just mean Canadians. I actually mean people in the West. I mean those who care about the Anglo-Celtic society and culture that gave us Canada, the United States, United Kingdom, Australia. You don't have to be of that race or ethnicity. You don't even have to speak English. It's whether you care about pluralism and tolerance and coexistence, Judeo-Christian virtues and values. And everybody can live, and anybody can live in that culture as long as they respect it, and I would hope, love it. But there are several and various attacks on that way of life. This doesn't mean that I'm a reactionary or even a traditionalist or even a conservative. It means I rather like a culture which says you can have your point of view and be respected. I disagree with you, but so what? That's your point of view. You're allowed freedom of expression and movement and travel and worship, and these things are not guaranteed in most of the world. In most of the world, as we speak, there are people who do not have the most fundamental freedoms that we take for granted in this country and elsewhere. And by the way, fundamental freedoms do not mean the right to not be offended. I'm offended, therefore I am. How offended are we I couldn't care less how offended someone is. You don't like me on TV, switch the bloody channel. It's what conservatives and Christians have been told for years. You don't like it, you don't have to watch. Odd, isn't it, that liberals, and I mean small L liberals, think in a different way. With them, it's always, you mustn't say that. No, just don't watch, don't listen. You don't have, it's not the CBC, it's not the state broadcaster. You don't have to pay for it. You don't like it, watch something else. Which is really the quintessence of Sun News. That's what we're trying to do. And for anyone, and let me be bold here, any one of you who says, oh, I used to get Sun News, but now you have to pay for it, I don't get it anymore. Shame on you. No, I mean, really, shame on you. We've been waiting how long for a TV network in this country that will speak the truth? And you won't pay, what is it, $20 a month to get a whole bunch of channels, including us? Get it.
$62.
No, that's not it. On top of what you have now, that's the total of what you pay. We're on the basic package. You just go up a little bit, and you get. How can you get the what you have now? CBC, CTV, Global. Why not just lie to each other for free? Exactly. So, put your hand in your pocket and subscribe. Not for me. I'm still paid the same amount of money. It doesn't matter how many people watch. But I just think it's a wonderful enterprise, a great experiment to try and take this country back.
May I ask a question?
No, that's later.
Why
Later, really. Q&A's later. So, some of the areas where we're at. First of all, let's talk about human rights commissions. Let's talk about human rights commission. Yeah, because they're so wonderful. Because, most of us, we open the door very carefully in the morning because there might be a neo-Nazi skinhead, a gang of them about to kill us on the corner. It's really frightening. Or we walk along and we'll be attacked because of our religion or our sexuality. It's hell living in Canada. It's hell! We live in one of the most tolerant societies in the history of humanity. Let me just say that again. We live in one of the most tolerant cultures in the history of humanity. There'll always be some idiot, some bigot. You'll never get rid of them. They're a tiny minority. They're irrelevant. They're irrelevant. But there are entire groups who fund and propagate themselves on this falsehood, this complete dishonest notion that everyone is out there to be nasty to everyone else. It's not true. For example, at Sun News, we had a series of ads objecting to the sex ed curriculum being imposed in Ontario. Now, you might not like the ads. That's fair enough. You don't have to watch. An organisation purchased time on Sun News to run these ads. An independent arbiter, the telecast, said the ads are acceptable. The ads ran. Okay. They're very powerful. Again, don't approve of them, don't have to watch. Advertising is meant to sell you something. A product, an idea, a person. Ads for a party, selling you the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition, whoever that is, I don't even know. Ads for a product, selling you soap. Shampoo. No, soap. Joke. They're selling you something. Ads for this against the sex ed curriculum are selling you an idea. They're not dishonest, they're not allowed to be dishonest, they're selling you an idea. You don't have to embrace it. What happened was, the National Post ran these ads, full-page ad, complaints were made. The National Post, which was a great newspaper, and it's still quite a good one, but the National Post apologized, groveled, gave the money that had purchased the ads to some radical gay organizations, said it would never run the ads again, and took free advertising from the organizations that had complained. The Toronto Sun simply didn't run the ads again, but at Sun News, thank God, we came back effectively, I think, with, I say 3 words in the response: go to hell. Now, I'm not as clever as the people who run the company, so they had a long letter that said, democratic debate and the essence of democracy is free expression and the free exchange of ideas through advertising, you're welcome to buy time, blah, 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 blah. But think about this for a moment. A teacher, a high school teacher, an NDP candidate high school teacher in Toronto said, I don't like the ads, thus I want you to be punished. Yeah. This is not in any way atypical, untypical today. This is a standard response. It's not, I disagree with you, I'm not going to watch you again. Or even, I'll ask my friends not to watch. Or I won't even buy products that you advertise. That's okay, it's part of the game, but I want you to be silenced. It's repeated time and time again. I don't believe that organization spoke for the gay community. It certainly didn't speak for Canadians in general. Human Rights Commission. Well, the first time I had direct contact with the Human Rights Commission, and I've never been taken, I don't know why, but I've never yet been taken to a Human Rights Commission. I feel very, very hard done by. Ezra, Mark Stein, they're always, look, me, what about me? Come on. I'm surely offensive, most people seem to think so. Including my wife these days. They were set up with quite a noble intent. If you were denied a job, or a place to live because of your colour, disability, sexuality, you couldn't afford to go to court, and it was wrong. But to say to someone, you can't live here because you are, I think that's wrong. And it was a way to try and settle these disputes without going to court. Not, whatever you think of that, it's not an unreasonable aspiration. Okay? I don't agree with it, but it's not unreasonable. We can talk about it. But they stopped being that long ago. Can you imagine someone in a wheelchair who's told, you're not going to live here, we don't have people in wheelchairs here. I want that person to have some access to justice. They stopped being that years ago. They're no longer, they haven't been for, golly, more than 10 years. They have not been a place to make sure that those who face discrimination are treated properly. They've been a venue to silence contrary speech. They have become a venue to silence contrary speech, used primarily by two groups, the gay community, elements of it, and Islam. The first time I came into direct contact was many years ago, a man called Scott Brocky. And I didn't really know what human rights commissions even were. They were distant in the memory. Today we all know about them. I'll give you another example. How many people knew anything about Islam before 9/11? You knew it was there, but you didn't really know much, did you? Suddenly after 9/11 there were thousands of books written, the libraries, bookstores, everyone was talking about it. I think human rights commissions are similar. We didn't know much about them. They were somewhere off in the distance, but suddenly they came into public view. Well, Scott Brocky called me, evangelical Christian fellow. This must be 15 years ago. He telephoned me and he said, Mike, you don't know me, but I've heard you on radio, and I need some help. And I met with him. And his story, and I'm telling you his story as opposed to Ezra Levant or Mark Stein, because you probably know their stories, and they can speak for themselves. But Scott wasn't influential and articulate the way Ezra and Mark are. Thank God, thank the living God, they went after Ezra Levant and Mark Stein. Because I've known Ezra for 20 years, he's a close friend. Try shutting Ezra up anytime, let alone when he has righteous indignation on his side. I mean, it's just not possible. And Mark is one of the most impressive people I've ever met. But Scott Brocky was an ordinary guy, he was a printer. He was trying to carve out a living for his family.